Messy and masterful. In this podcast, we speak about the success of people who have achieved, built, or done something amazing, special, remarkable, noteworthy, and/or fabulous. Think of presidents, doctors, chefs, architects, filmmakers, writers, philosophers, CEOs, journalists, and the list goes on of people who've had a genuine impact on this world. But rather than underlining their career victories, we speak about the challenges they needed to overcome to actually get there. In each episode, we discuss 3 of such challenges, obstacles, difficulties, and/or hurdles with our guest, putting the messy of their lives next to the masterful. A very warm welcome to you. My name is Alder Bab, and I'm so happy you could make it. So sit back, relax, and download the podcast here.
Word of mouth is still the most powerful because this is a very, very personal business.
Yeah.
Which, you can't sort out on, a click of a button. I can do all my internet shopping and et cetera, and I can buy strange things at the click of a button, but I couldn't buy a removal.
A very good day to you. I'm very happy you could make it for another episode of Messy and Masterful. It is not a week like any other. I am very confused. I'm actually very sad when I see and hear all the messages coming to us from the Middle East, and reading and seeing all these atrocities that have happened over the past days in Israel and in Gaza. My heart is with anyone who has been victimized by this conflict. We also strongly condemn the actions of Hamas as a terrorist organization. There is no law, there is no action, there is no deed, no conversation, nothing that legitimizes this or that should put this in another light. And I think, I'm sad. I'm just genuinely sad by everything that is happening. I'm speaking up because if you're like me, then over the past days, you might have been a bit confused. This conflict has been ongoing for decades and decades and decades. And I think many people try to stay away from it because they know that if you speak up, you need to choose one side or the other. Or if you're unsure about, where you want to position yourself, then you're afraid someone will use your words and position you in that direction. And I'm here to say you don't have to. You can just stand up and say, this is awful, this is horrific by any human standard. And with that, I really want to say, genuinely, my thoughts are with anyone who has been impacted by this. My thoughts are with my friends and acquaintances from Israel, and are with my friends and their families in Gaza, who I know on both sides have no political affiliation whatsoever, yet they are severely victimized by what's happening there. I wanted to raise this because I think it's important. And I also, am raising it because I don't want to produce a tone-deaf podcast series whereby, it looks like we're just cheerfully whistling our way through life, producing interview after interview, if something like this is going on in the world. On that note, we're moving on to a next interview, an interview with Anthony Ward-Thomas. And I think Anthony is one of the most grounded guests that we've had in this, in this series of interviews. Now we're at episode 65. Anthony is the founder of one of the biggest removal companies in the United Kingdom. It's really a fascinating business, the house removing business. I had never really given it any consideration until I spoke to Anthony. But this interview really got me thinking. I really like Anthony's outlook on life, and I like how Anthony got started into all of this. I was inspired by Anthony as well because he seems to know very well who he is, so the things that he can and cannot do. And I think that is a vital thing to have if you are thinking about setting up your own company, like what can and what can you not do. I was very inspired listening to Anthony, who describes basically his lifelong career into the house removing business. And I hope you will be as well. So have a listen, episode 65, interview with Anthony Ward Thomas, the house remover. First of all, a very warm welcome to you, Anthony Ward Thomas.
Yes, and good morning to everyone. Hello there. Yeah.
Just before we clicked record, you said this is the first time I do these things. Normally, I do it over the phone. Are you a bit scared?
No, not in the slightest. It's just that I did a phone, actually, funnily enough, actually, journalist interview yesterday, and they seem to flow quite well. Doing it in front of a screen and on the phone doesn't really pose a massive difference. But here we are. It's a change anyway.
Yeah, and you have behind you, if you're going through hell, keep going, said by Winston Churchill. But let's start there. Did you choose that quote?
I mean, it's part of the whole thing's about challenges and being a bit different. When I first started, we had my first lorry that I effectively painted myself, and it was rather dull and staid, and it just said Ward Thomas Removals and Storage. It pretty much said on the side of the lorry what we do. We then had a kind of revamp where all the lorries, we didn't mention removals. It was just an eponymous Anthony Ward Thomas on all the lorries. But in order to draw people's attention, we would have sayings and quotations and questions to engage people. One of which is the quotation you see behind me: if you're going through hell, keep on going. There are about 60 or 70 quotations splattered around the lorries. Looking at one, there says that bulls do not win bullfights. Little things like that. It engages people, keeps them interested, and arguing with a fool proves there are two is another one that I'm looking at now. So there are many quotations, none of which are attributable to me.
Okay.
But there are certain sayings on the back of vehicles. So it's just something to separate us out from a rather dull and entirely sort of staid image of the removal industry in this country. So it's a bit exciting. It's a bit different, and
it stands out.
It stands out. Exactly.
Yeah. No, and for good reason, because it does make you think, right? If you just see removal company, that's it, right?
I mean, they are removal lorries. It's quite plain that they are, but it doesn't say removals, and it doesn't say it, but it leaves people in no doubt as to what we do, and it's a traffic stopper.
Yeah.
So there we go.
And so how many lorries are circulating through the UK of Ward Thomas?
Within the group, well, we have we've got different brands within our removal business. So without going through all of the brands and their locations, we have about 150 to 200 vehicles, ranging from vans to trucks.
Wow. Okay.
So it's quite a meaningful amount in the business of removals.
Yeah, it's a very interesting business, and I want to know a lot more about it, because it's something that you don't think about too often, but when you kind of want it to be done very well. For you it might be different, but for people in their day-to-day, they don't really think about removing companies until the moment that they need one, and then at the moment that they need one, they want it to be done excellently. They want it to be done, they want the execution to be amazing.
I think to sort of help you on this particular subject, when I first started, I went to try and learn the tricks of the trade within another firm based out of London, and I worked there for a few days. And actually what that taught me was that the standards were so low and people's expectations of removals in 1985 were terrible. And another thing that was part of the culture, in fact endemic, was the fact that stealing was seen to be acceptable, and loss of small items, whether it be watches or Walkman or televisions, etc., was an acceptable way of behaving as far as the removal crew were concerned. Wow. I was quite jaw-dropped and wide-eyed when I first came across this, because it just seemed so acceptable. And I peeled myself back from this particular business, vowing to saying, well, look, if I could just change that and make that type of behavior entirely unacceptable, then I'm putting myself on a plateau that's so far above what the industry standards are. And anything from there is an easy sell. But I have to get that reputation of honesty, integrity, and empathy, the three words that I would use, which actually ended up being, a big challenge to establish that as a reputation.
Why do you think the bar was so low in 1985? I mean, people were still moving, weren't they?
Oh yeah, but it's been low. 85 was my first experience of it. I'm sure it was low from the word go. Yeah. I think part of it was the fact that in people employed, it was viewed as a very lowbrow job, of very low skill set and a very low intellect requirement. You pick a box up and you take it out, and you pick a sofa up and you take it out. And the people employed in the coalface of removals, sorry to use a mixed metaphor, were generally viewed as not very bright and not very self-achieving, etc. We, I think, have changed that, and I think that was really my first challenge, was to change that culture and or view of the person who's being employed to do this particular job. And I found that easy. I say easy is the wrong word. I found it came quite easy because of the people I employed to start with were of similar nature to myself. And the fact that stealing of whatever manifest it took was entirely unacceptable. But it wasn't something that we ever discussed. It was just something that was always unacceptable. So it didn't require discussion.
Yeah, it's kind of just behaving more ethically, or just not, making sure that, as you say, that things are done properly. It sounds like an easy win, but I'm sure it isn't, because I think what comes with your business maybe is you need a high quantity of people at different moments.
It's an absolute challenge, because the more people you have, the more diluted your principles can sometimes become. And it remains really the task of those people on the road, as I put it, to maintain that in your place. I can't be responsible for 500 people, but I can be responsible for 5 people, if you see what I mean. But those 5 people can be equally responsible for their 5, and their 5, and their 5. And ultimately, that's where it works. And notwithstanding that, the expectations of the industry now are such that honesty is a given. It's not, trust me. There are plenty of businesses out there, especially some of the newer internet businesses, that don't actually have vehicles themselves. They're just brokers, if you like. And they're very unscrupulous, and the people that turn up to do your job are equally unscrupulous, equally ill-trained. So, our standards are very high. But as I said, talking about challenges, to maintain those standards is a continual challenge, even though it's not one that one has to set out and then put back in the cupboard. It's a continual challenge.
We're going to talk about some more challenges. I want to hear all about this one as well, but also kind of how you overcame them. Let's first go back to when you started the company, because you mentioned something very interesting. You saw kind of an opportunity in the market whereby people say, well, when they're moving, it's just accepted that things are stolen, or things are, things disappear.
Things are broken and
Yeah, but what got you started was more an entrepreneurial dream to a certain extent, right? Because as your first challenge, you write, you say the penny dropped in 1984. You were a traveling salesman, and you had the sudden realization that you wanted to provide for your family in the way that you'd always dreamed or planned of. And if you were going to do that, you needed to bite the bullet, right? Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about what that bullet was, and also what the standard you were looking for? Like,
Yeah, I think to start at the beginning, I was employed. I was a salesman. It wasn't a bad job, but my ceiling of expectation as far as progressing in the big wide world was very low. I always sort of indicate that by, the managing director would be his emphasis of success was the car he drove, and likewise, that would be my aspiration to aspire to a Vauxhall Carlton, which is whatever. But in my original challenge was actually to not bullshit to myself, which is the easiest thing people do. They dream. And what you need to do as a challenge is to make that dream to fruition. You sometimes have to give yourself, and I call it, you have to have a self-imposed millstone around your own neck. I'm sure you understand the meaning of that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And that millstone can take many forms. The first form is to actually go and tell your boss that you're leaving. It's a challenge in the sense that you have to be quite brave. You have to stick to your plan, which means you cannot, once you have told your particular employer you're leaving, you must then leave. There's no going back.
Yeah.
Your credibility is hanging in the balance. You must then leave. And then the millstone gets slightly heavier around your neck, and you're wading into the water of uncertainty. And you then have to convince everybody around you that you are going to do this particular job. In my case, it was removals. I had the choice of two. I was going to start a funeral business or a removal business, because ultimately both businesses are quite simple, don't require a huge amount of academic input, and they have almost an indefinable market in the sense that people will always die and people will always move.
So that was in '84 also your philosophy? Like, okay, these are my two options?
Yeah. It was funerals or removals. That was my philosophy. So I plumped for the removals side, given the fact that it seemed easier to pick a sofa up, put it in a van and deliver it somewhere, as opposed to dig a hole and put a body in it. Both are quite simple, but in their way, I chose the former. So there we are. I can't remember. I've lost my thread slightly.
No, I want to go back. So my question was, what was the bullet? So the bullet was, telling your employer you would leave. You had already the concrete idea of the removing company. Did you already have a van, or where were you at when you left?
I suppose bite the bullet is probably too simplistic. It's quite a lot of bullets to bite.
Yeah.
So going back to the sort of the vehicle, if you like, or the van or the lorry in my case, I had a small amount of money. I think it was just under £1,000. I then went to a commercial auction in Blackbush. Big commercial vehicles were being sold, hundreds and hundreds of them. There were two vehicles that would suit my purpose, but they were, I think, £5,000 each, and I only had enough for the deposit. I phoned from the payphone my bank manager, who I was on good terms with. I explained that if he didn't lend me the £4,000, I would have actually spent £1,000 on my deposit and would have lost it. It's a strange way of negotiating for a loan, but at the same time, back in those days, my bank manager had the flexibility to say, yes, fine, we'll give you the money, since he put it that way, and put the phone down, and I bought my first truck. Here I was with a vehicle, a heavy goods vehicle, which I couldn't drive because I didn't have a license.
Oh.
So I then decided I need to get a license. So, as I said, these are these bullets are being bitten all along the way.
Yeah.
So I bought myself a truck, didn't have a license. So these things are being done. It's rather like retrospective planning permission. Put something up and then hope for the best.
Yeah.
Which is what I did. I passed my heavy goods vehicle license. I had my truck. I painted it myself. And I then proceeded to tell everybody that I was a removal man of some note, which was a complete lie because I'd never done a job in my life. But my first job duly came in. And again, there was another biting of the bullet whether or not I chose to accept it, because actually it was quite a big job. So I could have said, well, this is too big for me. But then I would have thought, well, if this is too big for me, when is the right job going to come along? So you kind of have to take the safety net away, and plow in. And the first job was a moderate success in the sense that whilst there were a few mishaps, we managed to get the house packed up, loaded, and delivered to the new address. And we were duly thanked and duly paid. And my feeling of euphoria, I remember even now, driving this empty truck away from the delivery address with a check for £560 in my pocket, which was quantifiably more than I earned in a month in my sales job. So it was an instant success. But following an instant success, you need to have another job, which took some time arriving. But it was a little bit like a kind of a quantum experience where you do one and then you have to wait, and then another one, and then you have to wait, and then 2 come, and then 4 come, and then 8 comes, and you suddenly realize you're working quite hard.
I have 2 questions. So one, with the first truck you did, how big was the team of removers? How many were you?
There was a friend from school. It was his girlfriend. It was my girlfriend. There was a guy from the pub, and it was his friend. So the guy from the pub actually he was training to be a journalist as well. So he was a university student, but he also worked in the pub. So we were kind of looking at each other during the course of this removal, slightly scratching our respective heads, wondering how this was all going to pan out. But as luck would have it, the customer decided to go on a 3-day holiday and leave us to it, which was honestly the nicest thing he could have ever done. So we papered over the cracks of our inexperience and got the job done.
Nice. And then the second question I have is, this was one successful mission, and then you needed to wait for the second, and then from 2, the growth. So what do you consider to have been most successful in kind of getting the word out that people should work with Ward Thomas?
I think reputation, and again, that forms another word to sort of about the challenge. When you're running, yourself, and you have your own standards, and you've got, your first crew, and they're willing to help, it's easy to maintain that standard. It's when you then have your second job, third job, fourth job, and you have to use and start to employ more people. The challenge is to educate them in the way that you want to continue. By way of service. We physically had got better at the job, packing the lorry, packing the contents. So we were actually becoming a little bit more expert at what we were doing. But the standard and the honesty and the integrity still had to be maintained, because they really were the watchwords of the business, and maintaining those would have been and has been the difference between the business flourishing and or floundering. And that still exists today. And the ethos and the mentality of the crews here is still today. Which is a big feather in the cap of those people who, run as managers here.
Nice. I read an interview in the Financial Times with you whereby you spoke about your first million. I think they're trying to make it making your first million in revenue. So I'm going back to this first mission of £560, and then having that has then scaled up to $1 million. Was that a feeling at that moment of particular pride, or did you not even register?
No, I didn't really register it because I don't know, I think it's a peculiar English thing where people punctuate success by the word a million, or your first million, or your second million, or whatever. So no, I mean, as I said, you make £560 in a day or 2 days or whatever the job was. You don't suddenly make $1 million. It doesn't, you don't suddenly walk out of the office, with your pocket.
Today it's $1 million.
£50 notes and going down the streets of Tooting saying, I'm a millionaire.
No,
that doesn't really happen. I can remember on the accounting front where some years later, it certainly would have been in the late 90s, when, my accountant said that, your turnover is X and your profitability will be somewhere in the region of £1 million, which was slightly glossed over. But at the same time, I do remember when it was there, but that was on an annual basis. And like all businesses, it's nice to have that, but at the same time, you have to reinvest, and you have to, reinvest whatever profits you've made in a sensible way in order to grow the business. So whilst it would have been nice to waddle down Tooting High Street with pockets bulging full of £1 million, it didn't last very long. On the basis that you've got to reinvest and keep growing.
Yeah. What I admire in your story, because I really see you seeing, in this, for the first time with this truck, not having the licenses. Did you think at any point, oh my goodness, what have I done? This is not going anywhere. I should stop. I should go back. Has there been a moment in those first years, as I know many entrepreneurs have, myself included, it's did you ever have okay, let's stop here, it's not going to work out, I've tried it, back to employment?
No, no. I mean, when I embarked on it, and maybe this is a product of my academic limitations, there was no plan B. It's
going to work.
There was no safety net. There's no plan B.
Yeah.
And I remember telling I've got twins who are singers and musicians, and I remember saying, their mother would say, "Well, look, if it doesn't work out, you can be a dress designer, or you can be a flute player, whatever." And we were in Nashville in Tennessee, and we just got there, and the kids were 19 years old. And I said to them, this is a fiercely different industry, being a musician and starting up as songwriters. I said, but as an artist, as both of you are artists, if you are thinking that you could be a dress designer or a secretary or something like that, then we're in the wrong place, because there is no plan B. And that was probably 11 years ago. And they are still performing. They've had a UK #1 album hit. If it's part of the thing. If you're ever thinking that this is too much or you've done the wrong thing, then you shouldn't have started it in the first place.
Yeah. So that's the millstone. So you give yourself that millstone.
You give yourself. But as you progress, and you've got your £1 million and you're spending it on new lorries and this, that, and the other, the millstone has almost disappeared. It's still there, but the weight of it is, and the depth of the pond that you dived into to start with is now far less. And actually, so you've done the hard yards. The hard yards are the first 4 or 5 years, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, no, definitely. I like this strictness you've given yourself. It's there's no other option. There's no plan B. And, I think it's very true. It's just get on with it. Sometimes there could be external circumstances, but you were not distraught by them. So that, that's very good. Going to your second challenge though, because the strictness is no reflection on your self-knowledge, because as your second challenge, you basically say that you needed to identify your weaknesses. You kind of realized that you weren't able to do it all if you wanted to grow the company. So you write, to grow a business, you need to know your weaknesses and bring in people to work with you and push it forward. And you brought in someone by the name of Charles Rickards, who understood mergers and acquisitions, which is, completely on the other end of the business, has nothing to do with, driving the vans around, and the corporate world a lot better. And that was a turning point. So talk to me a little bit about the process of, just wanting to do the removing to, okay, now being a significant player in the market, if not the biggest one in the market, and then trying to maintain your position.
Yeah, as I said, weaknesses are not necessarily, weakness is possibly the wrong word, but I think sort of shortcomings would be a better description. But then I think the strength of success is identifying that you cannot do all of these jobs because, well, you can do, but you're not going to be the best person to do it. So that is your first step. Your first challenge is to identify that you are not the best person to do mergers and acquisitions. You're not the best person to necessarily hire the right accountant type brain. So to come across an individual like Charles Rickards, who certainly would hold his hand up and say, as a removal man and or a motivator, he is not. But as someone who can look at deals in a slightly more corporate way, tax efficiency, etc., he is. So you join together with someone like that, and your process of growth is accelerated.
Was it hard to find such a person? Because you said a couple of times, you mentioned the word academic limitation or something like that. So you come across to me as someone who wants to get it done, who's not fearful of getting his hands dirty, who just really wants to build. You don't care too much for the blah, blah, maybe the academic blah, blah. So it might not gel well with someone who says, like, let's do spreadsheets and, corporate valuations. And am I correct, or am I completely off?
Absolutely. I tend to glaze over when things like that come, because I do realize that people are better. People have an interest in it and they love it. I can't think of anything worse. But I have to identify that I need to get on board with this particular in order to be, to grow and be a big player within, the market itself. So that has been a challenge. And also the challenge really is also to learn, not just to sort of turn my back on it and walk the other way, but to try and learn to a degree, what these people can bring to the party. And I have done, I have learned and I have got involved in that. It's not my strength, which is where I mentioned before, but it is certainly something that I've appreciated and how other people operate. Yeah. And bringing someone like that into the party, if someone said to me, what was the thing that changed your business? Or, what was the most significant thing that had the most immediate impact on the growth of your business? I would say involving Charles Rickards and his corporate experience, bringing that into the party was the single biggest reason why we managed to grow as quickly as we have.
And when did he come in? When did he join?
2003.
Okay.
So 20 years ago.
Yeah. And you were almost 20 years rolling already. So
1985. So 2005 would have been, that would have been it. Yeah. We have a similar background in the sense that we went to sort of similar schools. We both went to sort of monastic community schools. He then went on to university degree in, accountancy, etc. I didn't bother to go to university for reasons that I couldn't have gone to further education. That's not to say I didn't have I had a very nice education, don't get me wrong, but further education wasn't for me.
You wanted to start doing stuff.
Doing stuff, yeah.
How do you how do you cope with setbacks? Like when things do not go your way, what do you do then? You're not one that gives up. That's already clear to me. But what do you kind of, if there's a setback, if something didn't go, a deal didn't happen the way you thought it would,
I find
what's your coping mechanism?
I find setbacks now, even now. I'm a salesman, which is where I'm, my passion, I suppose, is, and that. So if I was to simplify myself, I'd say I'm a salesman. And even now, I find setbacks. If I try and make a sale for removals or whatever, and it doesn't work out for lots of reasons, price or attitude, whatever. I still feel that, and it knocks me a little bit, not for long, but it knocks me, and I think it's quite a healthy emotion to have, because it doesn't remove it, but it negates complacency.
Yeah.
In the sense that be prepared for knockbacks. And in the early days, we had breakdowns where my lorry, I think I was driving back from Oxford, and I was going down Baker Street, which is a one-way street, and the gearbox fell out the bottom of the truck.
Oh, goodness.
And I mean, I could see the road, and there were three of us in there looking at each other, thinking, what on earth are we going to do? Lucky it was empty. A police motorcycle rider turned up. He said, "You can't park here." I said, "Well, I can." We all ended up pushing the lorry to one side. And I had a job the following day. And that was a setback. I mean, that was, but you need these in order to be able to actually go, well, hang on.
Yeah.
We've got commitments to make, and our lorry is broken down, parked up in Baker Street.
Yeah.
You work it out. You work it out.
Yeah.
It's never plain sailing, but if it was plain sailing, people wouldn't do it.
Yeah. You've carved out this niche, of course, of high quality moving, and making sure you work with honest people, expert people, and that has definitely paid off, because you have a list of clients that is to be envied, from beautiful museums to celebrities who kind of use your services. Is that an important reference for your other clients? Do you feel that has a knock-on effect when you kind of mention, like, here's who we work with, here's what we do, because it doesn't come across as an exclusive segment. I think you still want to be accessible for everyone.
I think if you start you try to be too exclusive, people get frightened off by you. We wouldn't necessarily champion our clients in a way to say that, yes, we moved XYZ from the music industry, the film industry, political politicians, or other people of note. We tend to find that they have their own walk of life, in a sense that if we moved a very well-known musician, you tend to find that the phone rings and his contacts are phoning you, or her contacts are phoning you.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Matt Bellamy, you probably don't know who he is. Do you know who Matt Bellamy is?
The name rings a bell, but I don't have it very clearly on my radar, but the name definitely rings a bell.
He would be the front man to Muse,
okay.
Which would have been the biggest, whatever. And we moved him, lovely, lovely man. Everything went absolutely smoothly. And the phone will ring and it will be someone else who's, the bass player for Coldplay or such and such and such. And they just come because they're all working in the same. And that's how that works, that particular sector works. Rather than us saying to a client, well, of course we moved Matt Bellamy, or we moved Chris Martin, or we moved whoever. It's not kind of the way I would like to do it. I like people to come to us because their colleagues and friends and associates would come to us. Yeah. I mean, bizarrely, politically, we moved a senior member of the Conservative Party, and then and subsequent to that, and this was, I don't know, 7 years ago. Subsequent to that, the senior members of the Conservative Party, like them or not, seem to come to us as a sort of default. I certainly wouldn't. Part of me sometimes thinks, oh, there we go. But they're human beings and they have to be moved like everybody else.
Yeah.
So that's how that really works. We
It's just because you deliver a very correct, good service. You excel in what you do, and then automatically people don't see any problems in mentioning you or recommending you to their peers, right? That's just how it goes.
Absolutely, exactly. And peer group work is as important now, even with the internet, etc., as it was when I started in 1985.
Yeah.
Word of mouth is still the most powerful because this is a very, very personal business.
Yeah.
Which, you can't sort out on, a click of a button. I can do all my internet shopping and etc., and I can buy strange things at the click of a button, but I couldn't buy a removal. I could not buy a removal. And, when you're going to it, and I suppose this is the parallel with funerals, dare I say it, or do I say wedding planning, or things that are one hit and you want to get it right. You don't want to have things, you do not want to have a removal as a rehearsal.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't want to have, if that's the right way of putting it, it's got to be there, polished, done, and that's it.
Yeah.
And word of mouth is still the most powerful tool that we have within the business as a whole.
Yeah.
And I would actually probably have to add that 70% of our work is word of mouth or referral, even with the internet and even with Google, even with all of it. It still maintains that figure.
What's the worst thing that can happen with basically the client not having their affairs in order? I mean, I can imagine, no payment, but has there been any kind of weird surprises from your end? Like, okay, my goodness, this was completely unforeseen, and therefore we cannot deliver.
We had one customer die on us.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
Oh my goodness!
He was based in Clapham. He was an elderly gentleman. Don't get me wrong. He wasn't, jumping around and had a heart attack. He was quite an elderly gentleman, and he literally he died on us in his armchair.
Oh.
It was a few years ago, so those sort of curveballs can be sent, but it's like anything else. You have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And we almost became. We had this deceased individual. We then had to become the people who were trying to tell the people that mattered, his son. So the removal men then, of which I was included, because I was called in to try and help, were then the sort of brokers of bad news. But at the same time, we had to continue with our physical job.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that happened. Thankfully, it's only happened once.
Yeah. Goodness.
There are plenty of times when, and I would suggest during sort of separations or divorces where there is enormous amounts of friction and some pushing and some pulling, and we are sometimes left in the middle of all of this as partial mediators. But also at the same time, if there is a piano that needs to be moved, we have to take it somewhere, and that can be fraught. That can be very fraught. But the guys are good at dealing with it. But
stay calm.
Sorry?
Stay calm, I can imagine, if you need to be a mediator and say, like, put that down, that's mine.
Oh, we've had loads of that. Put that down, it's mine. Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Taking a piece of furniture out, putting it in a lorry, then bringing it back, and then taking it out again and bringing it back.
Oh.
Yeah.
The best answer is then, right, we're just going to leave. Maybe you should sort this out first before we continue.
It would be. We try not to go there. We try not to sort of hold a Damoclean sword over these poor people's situations because, at some stage in their respective lives, they did have a love and passion for each other. And you think, come on, just discover that just for the next couple of hours.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Goodness. You now have a couple of hundred vans going around. You obviously are everywhere in the business and putting out all the fires. Do you still do any moving yourself? Are you sometimes in a lorry?
I did.
Oh, you did? Yeah.
I did. I was I was driving past one of the removal trucks. Actually, it was about 6 months ago, and it was funny. It was one of my customers, so I dropped in to say, how's it all going? And it was going fine, but I had a couple of hours. I said, oh well, I'll get my hands dirty as such. Anyway, I picked up a box. It was so heavy I could barely stand up with it. And I thought, nah, this isn't for me anymore. I'm just going to make a fool of myself. Yeah. So I put the box down and made my excuses and left. It's a hard job. It's a young man's job. Yeah, I'm fit enough and all the rest of it, but it's a young man's job. And frankly, I think they probably viewed me when they saw me struggling with this box with a little bit of humor.
Yeah.
But
good on you for going and joining them and whatever.
If I had to do it, I would.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be my first choice.
Yeah. Which is a nice segue into your last challenge, because your last challenge is again about delegation, and you come across as someone that, as I said before, doesn't mind getting his hands dirty, would really like to get it done, make sure that it's all solid and can grow, is resilient. But I think that also comes with a character trait of might have difficulty to let other people in. Because you do write it down as your third challenge, like I needed to delegate. Now you mentioned Charles Ricard as someone who was brought in 20 years, when after the business was founded to look into the other end of the business. But as we said before, you also need to delegate the tasks that you currently do. What is do you have a plan to at some point say, well, I'm going to retire, or I'm just going to join my children on tour, or do something else than moving?
Yeah, I have joined my children on tour, one of whom's just had a baby, and she's going back on tour in November, so I'm probably just going to be looking after the baby, which is, as a grandfather, which really ages me and doesn't make me feel particularly wonderful, but there we go. Now, I think like these things, the business itself, talking about delegating, is occupied by additional shareholders. So within the business itself, we open the doors to individuals to invest in their future. And we have amongst the staff nearly 40 individual shareholders whose future is here. And I think they look to me as a sort of, not a day-to-day person, but certainly someone who's going to look after their interests on a continual basis. So that's really where we are on a sort of, if you like, the word delegation works if you learn how to do it, which I have done, but it works supremely better if these individuals have, a slice of the pie.
Yeah.
Because then delegating becomes an awful lot easier. Because you find actually that you don't really delegate anymore because they've taken on that mantle of responsibility without being told to do so. So it's kind of a subliminal delegation, if you like, that has sort of morphed into this business on the basis of mutual shareholdings.
What was you said you learned how to delegate. What was the most difficult thing for you to delegate?
I suppose right from the start, I always used to be there at when the last lorry would come back. I don't mean we had hundreds then. Let's say, we had 5 vehicles, and there would be one that would be late, and it would be 7 o'clock in the evening or 8 o'clock. I would always wait until they got back. I want to feel their pain, etc., 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 which had its drawbacks. It was very laudable in the sense of the principle of feeling the removal man's pain, but then walking away from that and actually letting the guys come in without, the sort of grandfather figure looking after them, that sort of thing of wresting myself away from that responsibility was a way of kind of delegating, if you like, to the crews as they came back, made them a bit more independent.
Yeah.
So stepping back,
Yeah.
even though it felt a bit alien, but stepping back and letting people sort themselves out, sort their own trucks out, rather than me interfering, was the first step in delegation.
Yeah.
And as I said, finding people who are better at the job than you are,
Yeah.
operationally, finding guys who are better at working, running vehicles, people whose attention to detail is absolute, whereas mine is a little fluffy, if you see what I mean. So it's just trusting that people will do the job better than you.
Yeah. And I think you need to, because you know physically you're not able to do it alone from the start. You mentioned in '84 in the truck someone, your friend, his girlfriend, your girlfriend, kind of all these people together. So it is a business whereby it's a joint effort in the first place. So yeah, you can do it on your own, but then letting it go completely, that might be a completely
you can't
thing.
do that. Yeah. But I think, as I said, if you can't, delegation is one way of, but if you can't, I think it's probably more trust. If you can't trust the people that you've entrusted to do the job, you won't progress.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to say that.
Yeah. No, but I think it's all nice and well when you trust someone and it all goes well, but sometimes that trust can also be abused, or it could go the other way. Or as you say, if an employee of you might have taken something, we started this interview with the ethos: we don't take anything, we don't whatever. Yeah. What if it happens? What do you do then? Because you've given your trust to someone who has violated it. So how do you then deal, with those circumstances? But
firstly, you deal with the setback that you touched on earlier.
Yeah.
And the disappointment that you've made a judgment that is wrong.
Yeah.
And also the fact that, we are human and everyone has failings and faults. But you also have to realize that particular incident of whatever is unacceptable. And you have to part company, and that can be difficult as well, knowing that we've all got our own faults and failings.
Yeah.
So, that would be a challenge.
But you will not be discouraged on that level. That you say, well, we're closing business. It's you got to keep going, right? So
it's part of what happens.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Anthony. This is all fascinating and very interesting. We're almost at the end of this interview. I always have like three last questions that I ask to every guest. Before I do so, I just wanted to know a little bit more about the business, because you already hinted towards these websites that are actually brokers. They're not actually the companies doing the moving, and that causes loads of problems. What do you see the removing business morphing into? Has there been any disruption or any change, or people doing things very differently? And what does that mean for Ward Thomas?
Interesting one. I will, as I said, the internet brokerage sites are what I call snapping at the heels of businesses like mine that do the job properly. But it's the ignorance of the marketplace that can sometimes fall foul of these. When I say fall foul, they couldn't be worse. They go back to pre-1985 standards of punctuality, turning up. I'll give you an example. You can go on a website called Anyvan, and you can book a removal through their portal, and there will be a very, very big chance that people won't turn up. There'll be a very big chance that the vehicle that they turn up with, if they do, is too small. And the 2 people or the 3 people that turn up will not have an idea who, what, or why. And this is where the industry is falling foul. We will get calls on a daily basis from people in severe distress saying, we've done this online, and because it's online, there is a certain sort of understood level of trust and standard, but that couldn't be further from the truth. So I'm hoping really that the reputation of these particular online businesses shoot themselves in the foot and people realize that, like anything else that's important to them, the wedding day, the removal or the funeral or the hospital care, these businesses, they need to go back and feel confident, and they need to go to see, they need to have something that's tangible rather than relying on the internet.
Yeah. I think, I think they might do it once, but then they're going to be so disappointed of having used that service that they'll come back. It's also the life cycle of the customer. I think you should look at, how many times do people move in their lives?
Yeah,
and
definitely. Once you've gone that route, you'll never go back.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, I've got a duty of care to the industry and the customers.
Yeah.
And it always hurts me when they come back saying, we wish we hadn't done that.
Yeah.
And it's all very well saying, I told you so, but that doesn't help.
No.
You just gotta, get on and do what you can.
Yeah. I think people need to make their mistakes and then they'll come back. And I think you need to be consistent with the quality that you deliver. And then, I think you're right. They'll be back or they'll call you, because again, I think that peer-to-peer recommendation works stronger than anything. Yeah.
I mean, these businesses won't rely on any peer-to-peer recommendations.
Yeah.
They can't.
Yeah. But that's not to say that they can book online with Ward Thomas, right? You have a good website or people can call or whatever. It's not that you are...
They can book some things online, but not their main house move.
Okay.
No.
So they need to pick up the phone for that one.
Yeah. We need to talk to them.
Yeah.
As I said, it's like, it's like booking a wedding online.
Yeah.
Wedding planners, or you can't do that. What music do you want? You can't do that.
Too many questions.
Yeah. It's the service industry.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that modern technology, et cetera, can't replicate, and that is something that we do.
Yeah. Nice. Well, thank you for taking us in this world of removing companies. It surely helped me to get a better understanding of it, and I for one will not go with just a van, just because of the sheer work. Right, it's just a lot of work to get it all done.
Where do you live?
I live currently in Scotland, in Aberdeen.
Oh, right.
And I moved from London to Aberdeen, and then we were privileged enough to have a professional moving company helping us.
Who was the moving company?
I would need to check. I'm sorry, I don't know anymore. I think it was a company that we worked with. It was also an international company, because when we moved from, so my wife lived in Berlin before coming to London, and she used a international moving company. It was paid for by her company, and I think we used that company again because we were very satisfied with how they did everything. But they were obviously also kind of, very much focused on the service.
Yeah, good for them.
So they did a very good job, and therefore we worked with them again, moving us from London to Aberdeen, because it's just so much stuff. And so many boxes.
Why Aberdeen, may I ask?
So I am the traveling spouse. So it's my wife got a job offer. So she works in the catering and facility management services. So she worked for a big company called Compass. Yes, and after 10 years, the competitor Sodexo had an offer for her, but that would require her to move to Aberdeen. We had grown as a family in the meantime, and our 2-bed apartment in Clapham didn't fit anymore, and this was also in during the lockdowns and pandemics and whatever. And we then decided, well, why don't we try this also for the well-being of our daughter? I myself am doing this company, and I'm involved in technology. So I work with loads of software developers, but they work from anywhere. So for me, the location wasn't really important. But the quality of life was a main consideration for us to move, and we haven't regretted it. I don't know if we're going to stay here, for the rest of our lives, but we're good for here right now.
No, good. Yeah. Anyway, there we go.
Yeah, but I'll let you know if we need a moving company. I'll definitely come back to you if and when we move. Now for my 3 very last questions. Could you help me finish this sentence, Anthony? as a child, I wanted to become a
bigger child.
a bigger child.
A bigger child, yeah. As a child, I wanted. Oh gosh, what is? I don't remember any aspirations as a child as to what I wanted to become. I had a, I had a memorable childhood. Slightly absentee parents, so I was pretty free. Um, what did I want? As a child, I wanted to be just as happy, I suppose.
Oh, okay.
Just as content.
Yeah.
Happy is a
It didn't manifest itself into a job. You didn't an astronaut or a kind of pirate or something like that. Yeah.
No, I wanted to be a cricketer.
Cricketer. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I wanted to be a cricketer. Wasn't good enough.
Yeah, didn't happen. Yeah. Good. Then a question around content that might have inspired you. This could be a book, it could be a website, could be a journal, could be I don't know, whatever. It's like throughout your career, has there been any reading that you would recommend another person? Has something inspired you on your career path that you said, well, this is one to remember and one to recommend?
I suppose the thing that sticks out, there was a book that was, I think, made into a film, but I don't know. And it was called Sammy Goes South.
Okay.
And it was about a little boy whose parents had forgotten or had neglected to make arrangements. And he had to make his own way from North Africa to South Africa.
Oh, wow.
And more than that, I remember the story. It was a slightly romantic story in the sense that he didn't come across anyone bad particularly, but he managed to get from North Africa to South Africa. And the circumstances, I think, were the fact that his father was in the services and that his mother had been taken in inauspicious circumstances to the south. So, yeah, there you go. It's a book called Sammy Goes South. And I would have read it at the age of about 11 or 12.
Okay. And Sammy Goes South has been with you in growing your company?
I remember it all the time. It's
nice.
As you just asked me.
Yeah.
It's not, I remember it all the time.
Nice.
Not so much as it inspires me, but and I don't think that's necessarily relevant where people think, oh, that inspires me. But it's something that I could, always. I've read lots and lots of books and seen lots and lots of films, as we all have. But it would have been something, as you just asked me now, that floats to the top and it just comes out.
Nice. I'll definitely check it out. Sammy Goes South. Beautiful recommendation. And then my very last question. Let's turn the tables here. Now it's you who have a podcast, not me. Who would be your first guest?
Who would be my first guest?
Who would you want to? Who would be high on your list?
Who would be high on my list? I'd say at the moment, I would probably say Ben Stokes. Ben Stokes is the current England cricket captain.
Back to the cricket, yeah.
Back to the cricket. I know, you guys don't play cricket, but as a current dinner party guest, if you like, he would be the man for cricketing reasons. It may be a bit narrow. You may want to look at, a more historical, a more global figure. And I think, given the current circumstances in Europe and in Russia, I think the queue to have Volodymyr Zelensky as your first guest would be quite long.
Yeah, and it needs to be your guest, right? You need to be happy with the guest, and you're obviously you warm up to cricket. So Ben Stokes is your guest. I don't want the guest of anyone else. I want your guest.
He would be my guest because I would enjoy it to have someone like Volodymyr Zelensky there as your guest. Would be a little bit arrogant and a little bit trite, because I think. It would be an obvious choice, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. So we go with Ben Stokes.
We go with Ben Stokes.
Yeah. This was a lovely interview. Thank you so much, Anthony, for taking the time to talk to us. You're definitely, I think, one of our more grounded guests. I think you're very kind of, the hard work and the groundedness comes across very much so. And it's inspiring to see that it has become such a success, that on the basis of that groundedness, you've been able to build such a beautiful company. It was a privilege talking to you. Thank you so much for your time, Anthony Mort Thomas.
If you liked this episode, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Philip Anderson for our beautiful theme music. This episode was edited by Natalie Piles with production assistance from Genta Metalia.